What if I told you that right now, as you're watching this video, your brain isn't just inside your skull processing information. It's actually entangled with the fabric of space-time itself. What if the thoughts you're having aren't entirely yours, but part of a vast cosmic conversation that's been going on since the Big Bang? Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you will completely shatter your understanding of where you end and the universe begins. In 2020, physicist Roger Penrose won the Nobel Prize for his groundbreaking work on black holes. But here's what most people don't know. Penrose has spent decades arguing that human consciousness isn't produced by the brain. It emerges from quantum processes that connect us directly to the fundamental structure of reality. And he's not alone. Scientists at the Kavli Institute for Theoretical Physics have recently discovered that the pattern of neurons firing in your brain follows the exact same mathematical structure as the cosmic web connecting galaxies across the universe. The same patterns. The exact same mathematics. Think about that for a second. Your 86 billion neurons are wiring themselves in the same way that dark matter connects billions of galaxies across 93 billion light years of observable space. This isn't a coincidence. This isn't a metaphor. This is measurable, documented, reproducible science that suggests something absolutely mind-bending. Your brain might not just be observing the universe. It might be the universe observing itself. Here's the revelation that's going to change everything you thought you knew. There is no hard boundary between your consciousness and the cosmos. The separation you feel? That's an illusion created by your sensory limitations. And over the next 3.5 hours, I'm going to prove it to you using cutting-edge neuroscience, quantum physics, and discoveries so recent that most science textbooks haven't caught up yet. Before we dive deeper, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe, because you're going to want to come back to this video multiple times. Trust me, your brain can't fully process what's coming in just one viewing. Also, drop a comment telling me what country you're watching from and what time it is right now. I want to see this global network of consciousness connecting in real time. Are you in Tokyo at 3 a.m.? Mumbai in the afternoon? New York during your lunch break? Let me know, because that timing, that moment you chose to click this video, might not be as random as you think. Now, let's start with something you think you understand: your brain. You've probably heard that the human brain is the most complex object in the known universe. That's actually true, but not in the way most people think. Your brain contains more connections than there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy. But here's where it gets weird. Those connections aren't fixed. They're not hardwired like a computer. Every single second, your brain is reorganizing itself, creating new connections, pruning old ones, responding to information that's coming from where exactly? That's the question that's been haunting neuroscientists for decades. Where does information come from? When you have an idea, a thought, a sudden insight, where did that originate? The traditional answer is neurons firing in response to sensory input and stored memories. Chemical reactions producing consciousness. But this explanation has a massive problem. And it's a problem that's been swept under the rug for too long. In 1994, mathematician and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff teamed up with Roger Penrose to propose something radical: the orchestrated objective reduction theory, or OR. They suggested that consciousness arises from quantum computations happening inside structures called microtubules within your neurons. Now, I know quantum has become a buzzword that gets thrown around to sound scientific. But stay with me. This is the real deal. Microtubules are tiny structures inside your brain cells, and they're operating at a scale where quantum effects actually matter. At room temperature, in the warm, wet environment of your brain. This shouldn't be possible according to classical physics. Quantum effects should collapse instantly in such conditions. But in 2013, researchers at the National Institute of Mathematical Sciences in South Korea discovered quantum vibrations in microtubules that persist far longer than anyone thought possible. They found evidence of quantum coherence, the same phenomenon that allows particles to exist in multiple states simultaneously happening inside living neurons. Think of it like this. Imagine your brain is not a computer made of wires and switches, but more like a quantum instrument, a violin string that's resonating with frequencies coming from the quantum field itself. When you pluck one string, it vibrates. But it doesn't vibrate in isolation. It resonates with every other string in the universe. That's tuned to the same frequency. Your thoughts might be the result of your brain tuning into quantum information that exists everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. But where does this quantum information come from? This is where things get really interesting. In 1982, physicist Ailing Aspect conducted an experiment that would change everything we understand about reality. He proved that two particles, once connected, remain instantaneously connected regardless of the distance separating them. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance and hated it because it seemed to violate the cosmic speed limit set by light. But Aspect proved it was real. This phenomenon is called quantum entanglement, and it's been verified thousands of times in laboratories around the world. Here's what will blow your mind. If quantum entanglement is real, and if your consciousness operates using quantum processes, then your brain is potentially entangled with quantum information throughout the entire universe. Not connected by signals traveling through space, but connected instantaneously through the quantum field itself. You're not receiving information from the universe. You're already part of the universe's information network. Let me give you a concrete example of what this might mean. Have you ever thought of someone you haven't talked to in years, and then they call you or text you within hours or days? Coincidence, right? Maybe. But what if those kinds of experiences aren't coincidences at all? What if they're examples of quantum information processing that your conscious mind interprets as thoughts, but which are actually correlations emerging from entangled quantum states? Now, I'm not saying every random thought you have is some mystical cosmic message. But what I am saying is that the hard line between internal thought and external information might not exist at the quantum level. And that has profound implications for everything we think we know about free will, creativity, intuition, and the nature of ideas themselves. The mathematician and philosopher Bernardo Kastrup has proposed something called analytical idealism, which flips our entire understanding of consciousness on its head. Instead of consciousness being a product of the material universe, he argues that consciousness is the fundamental reality, and the material universe is what consciousness looks like from a particular perspective. Your brain doesn't produce consciousness. Your brain is what consciousness looks like when you observe it from the outside. It's a receiving and transmitting station, not the source. This isn't just philosophical speculation. In 2019, researchers at UC San Diego discovered that when they placed human neurons in a petri dish and exposed them to random noise, completely random information, the neurons began organizing themselves into patterns that could process and respond to that information. They self-organized, without any pre-programming, without any design, as if the neurons were tuning into information and structuring themselves to resonate with it. Think of it like this. You know how a radio doesn't create music. It receives radio waves and converts them into sound you can hear? What if your brain works the same way? It doesn't create consciousness. It receives it, filters it, and converts it into thoughts, feelings, and perceptions that you experience as you. And if that's true, then when your brain is damaged or dies, consciousness doesn't disappear. It just stops being filtered through that particular biological receiver. I can see some of you thinking, okay, but where's the evidence? This sounds like pseudoscience. Fair question. Let's talk about the Global Consciousness Project, conducted by Princeton University from 1998 to 2015. Researchers placed random number generators devices that produce truly random sequences of ones and zeros in locations all around the world. These devices should produce completely random results, statistically equivalent to flipping a coin. And they did. most of the time. But during major global events, 9/11s, the 2004 tsunami, the death of Princess Diana, Obama's inauguration, the random number generators became less random. They started showing patterns, correlations, as if some kind of global consciousness was influencing these supposedly random quantum processes. The statistical probability of these correlations happening by chance is less than 1 in a billion. Something was creating order and randomness during moments when millions or billions of human minds were focused on the same event. Now, skeptics have criticized this research, and that's healthy. That's how science works. But the data is there. The correlations exist. And they suggest that human consciousness, when synchronized across large populations, can measurably affect quantum processes. If that's true, then consciousness isn't just observing reality, it's participating in creating it. Let me connect this back to your brain specifically. Your brain uses about 20% of your body's energy, despite being only 2% of your body weight. That's an enormous metabolic cost. From an evolutionary perspective, your brain would only consume that much energy if it was doing something absolutely critical for survival. But here's the puzzle. Most of your brain's activity isn't responding to sensory input. It's not processing what you see, hear, or feel. Studies show that about 80% of your brain's energy goes to what neuroscientists call the default mode network, activity that happens when you're not focused on anything external. What is your brain doing with all that energy when you're just sitting there, daydreaming, letting your mind wander? The traditional explanation is that it's consolidating memories, running simulations, maintaining itself. But what if it's doing something else? What if it's processing quantum information from the field, integrating data from non-local sources, essentially downloading information from the universe's hard drive? This might sound like science fiction, but consider this. Where do creative insights come from? Mozart claimed entire symphonies appeared in his mind fully formed. Einstein said his theory of relativity came to him in a dream. Tesla could visualize complex machines in perfect detail without ever drawing them. Where did this information come from? If the brain is just computing based on past inputs, then truly novel ideas, genuinely new information shouldn't be possible. But they are. They happen all the time. The mathematician Srinivasa Ramanujan is one of history's most fascinating cases. He was a self-taught Indian mathematician with almost no formal training, yet he produced thousands of mathematical theorems and formulas that were decades ahead of his time. When asked how he came up with them, he said the Hindu goddess Namagiri would appear in his dreams and show him mathematical formulas. Now, you can dismiss that as religious superstition, but here's the thing. His formulas were correct. They worked. And many of them weren't proven or fully understood until decades after his death in 1920, when modern computers could finally verify them. Where did Ramanujan get information that was mathematically correct, but unknown to human mathematics at the time? Did his brain somehow compute these formulas from first principles? Or was he accessing information that existed in some form outside his individual brain? That's the question that haunts me, and it should haunt you too. Now, we need to talk about time, because if your brain is connected to the universe through quantum processes, then it's not just connected across space, it's connected across time. Quantum mechanics has this bizarre feature where particles don't just exist in multiple places simultaneously. They can also be correlated across time. The double-slit experiment proves that observing a particle in the present can change its behavior in the past, not metaphorically. Actually change what happened in the past. This has been verified experimentally. In 2012, physicists at the Australian National University conducted a delayed choice experiment that proved observation in the present determines reality in the past. The implications are staggering. If your consciousness operates through quantum processes, and those processes can be correlated across time, then your present thoughts might be influenced by your future self. That déjà vu you experience? That sense of precognition, of knowing what's going to happen next. Those might not be glitches. They might be quantum information flowing backward in time from future versions of you. I know how crazy that sounds, but think about your own experience. Haven't you ever made a decision that seemed irrational at the time, but later turned out to be exactly right? Haven't you ever felt inexplicably drawn to do something, go somewhere, talk to someone, for no logical reason, only to discover later that it led to something important? We dismiss these experiences as coincidence or luck, but what if they're evidence of your brain accessing information from the quantum field across time? The physicist John Wheeler, who worked with Einstein and Bohr, proposed something called the participatory anthropic principle. He argued that the universe requires observers to bring it into existence. Not that observers create the universe after it already exists, but that observation itself is what actualizes reality from quantum potentiality. The universe isn't a thing that exists independently of consciousness. It's a process of consciousness observing itself, collapsing quantum waves into concrete reality. Here's the most mind-bending part. If Wheeler is right, then your act of observing the universe right now is literally helping to create the universe's past. Your consciousness at this moment is participating in determining what happened 13.8 billion years ago at the Big Bang. The universe's history isn't fixed. It's being written backward from the present moment by conscious observers like you. Think of it like this. Imagine the universe as a massive quantum computer running an incomprehensibly complex program. That program exists in a superposition of all possible states, every possible history, every possible configuration, until it's observed. Your brain is one of trillions of observation points that collapse those quantum probabilities into the specific reality you experience. You're not watching a movie that's already been filmed. You're in the editing room, and every choice you make, every observation you perform, is determining which version of the film becomes real. This brings us to a critical question. If your brain is connected to the universe, if consciousness is fundamental rather than emergent, then what happens when you die? Does consciousness end when the brain stops functioning, or does it simply stop being filtered through that particular biological structure? This is where science meets the deepest questions humans have ever asked, and the answers are far stranger than any ancient religion or philosophy imagined. We've reached our first major checkpoint, about 15 minutes in, and you should be feeling your sense of reality starting to shift. If you're still watching, you're exactly where you need to be. But I need to warn you, what comes next is going to challenge every assumption you have about the nature of self, identity, and the boundary between you and everything else. We're going to dive into the neuroscience of mystical experiences, the quantum mechanics of consciousness, and evidence from the edges of human knowledge that suggests the universe isn't just connected to your brain. Your brain might be a hologram of the entire universe. But before we go there, take a moment. Look at your hands. Feel the chair beneath you. Notice the sensation of being here now, in this moment. Because by the end of this video, your understanding of what those sensations actually are, what, here and now, and you actually, mean is going to be completely transformed. Stay with me. We're just getting started. So let's go deeper. We need to talk about the holographic principle, because this is where physics and consciousness collide in the most unexpected way. In 1993, physicist Leonard Susskind proposed something that sounds like it came straight out of science fiction. The holographic principle states that all the information contained in a volume of space can be represented by information on the boundary of that space. Think of it like this. A 3D hologram is created by information encoded on a 2D surface. The depth you see is an illusion. All the actual information is flat. Now here's where it gets wild. Susskind and others have argued that our entire universe might be a hologram. That this three-dimensional reality you're experiencing right now, with depth and volume and space between objects, might actually be information encoded on a two-dimensional boundary at the edge of the universe. You're not in a 3D space. You're a pattern of information being projected from a 2D surface. and you experience yourself as three-dimensional. But wait, if the universe is holographic, and your brain is part of the universe, then your brain is also holographic. And here's the kicker. In a hologram, every piece contains information about the whole. If you cut a holographic image in half, you don't get half the image. You get the entire image at lower resolution. Every fragment contains the whole. In 2017, researchers at the University of Southampton published a paper in Physical Review Letters showing that the holographic principle isn't just theoretical. It matches observations of cosmic microwave background radiation, the afterglow of the Big Bang. The universe really might be holographic. And if that's true, then every neuron in your brain contains information about the entire universe. Your brain isn't just connected to the universe. It's a microcosm that reflects the macrocosm. As above, so below, as the ancient mystics said, except they were describing actual physics. Neuroscientist Carl Pribram proposed something similar in the 1960s with his holonomic brain theory. He argued that memories aren't stored in specific locations in the brain, but are distributed throughout the brain as wave patterns, just like information in a hologram. This explains why people with significant brain damage can often retain memories, because those memories aren't located in one place, but are encoded in wave patterns distributed throughout the neural network. But Pribram went further. He suggested that if the brain is holographic and the universe is holographic, then the brain's hologram is interfacing with the universe's hologram. Your experience of reality isn't the universe directly. It's the interference pattern created when your brain's holographic processes interact with the universe's holographic structure. You're not perceiving reality. You're participating in a cosmic interference pattern that generates what you experience as reality. Let me give you an analogy. Think of two pebbles dropped into a still pond. Each creates ripple circular waves spreading outward. When those waves meet, they create an interference pattern, places where the waves amplify each other and places where they cancel out. That interference pattern is more complex than either set of waves alone. It contains information about both sources. Your consciousness might be the interference pattern created when your brain's quantum processes interact with the quantum field of the universe. You're not a thing, you're a process, a pattern, a wave of information continuously interacting with other waves. This explains something that's always puzzled neuroscientists, the binding problem. Your brain processes visual information in one area, auditory information in another, emotional information in another, and so on. So how do you experience a unified reality? How does all that separate information get bound together into the single, coherent experience of being you? The traditional answer involves neural synchronization, but that just pushes the question back. What synchronizes the synchronizers? The holographic model offers an answer. There is no binding problem because there's no separation to bind. Your experience isn't constructed from separate pieces. It's a unified field that your brain is tuning into. And what appears as separate faculties are just different frequencies or aspects of that unified field. The separation is the illusion, not the unity. Now, let's talk about what happens when people experience that unity directly. Mystical experiences, profound states where people report feeling connected to everything, where the boundary between self and other dissolves, have been reported throughout human history in every culture. For a long time, science dismissed these as hallucinations, mental illness, or wishful thinking. But in the last 2 decades, that's changed dramatically. Neuroscientist Andrew Newberg at the University of Pennsylvania has spent years studying the brains of people during deep meditation and prayer using brain imaging technology. What he discovered is fascinating. During mystical experiences, there's decreased activity in the parietal lobe, the part of your brain that creates your sense of self in space, that maintains the boundary between you and not you. When that area quiets down, people report experiencing oneness with the universe, losing the sense of where they end and everything else begins. But here's what's crucial. This isn't just neurons misfiring. The experience is accompanied by increased coherence throughout the brain, different regions synchronizing in ways they don't during normal consciousness. It's as if the brain is reorganizing itself into a more unified, integrated state. And people who have these experiences report them as more real than ordinary reality, not less. They describe it as waking up from a dream, not falling into one. In 2006, researchers at Johns Hopkins University conducted controlled studies with psilocybin, the active compound in psychedelic mushrooms. Under carefully controlled conditions, they gave volunteers psilocybin and found that over 60% reported having one of the most meaningful experiences of their entire lives, comparable to the birth of a child or the death of a parent. These weren't drug addicts seeking escape. These were psychologically healthy volunteers, many of them professionally accomplished, and their experiences consistently involved feeling connected to something greater than themselves, dissolving into universal consciousness. Now, you might think, well, that's just drugs affecting brain chemistry. And you're right, but that's exactly the point. If changing your brain chemistry can dissolve the boundary between you and the universe, then that boundary was always neurochemical, always contingent, always somewhat artificial. The separation you feel isn't a fundamental feature of reality. It's a feature of how your brain processes reality, and that processing can be altered. Roland Griffiths, the lead researcher on those psilocybin studies, found something even more interesting. The mystical experiences people had during these sessions correlated with long-term positive changes in their lives. People reported being more open, more creative, less afraid of death, more connected to others, and these changes persisted for months and even years after a single experience. It's as if briefly experiencing the universe, without the filter of ego, permanently changed their relationship to reality. What's happening in the brain during these experiences? Current research suggests that psychedelics temporarily disrupt the default mode network. Remember, that's the network we talked about earlier that uses most of your brain's energy. The default mode network is thought to be responsible for your sense of self, your ego, your internal narrative. When it's disrupted, the rigid boundaries between different parts of your brain dissolve, and areas that don't normally communicate start exchanging information. Think of it like this. Normally, your brain is organized like a country with strict borders. Information flows along established highways and authorized channels. During mystical experiences, those borders dissolve and information starts flowing everywhere, creating novel connections, new patterns. Your brain becomes more like the universe itself, less structured, more fluid, more interconnected. And in that state, people report accessing information or experiencing realities that seem impossible under normal consciousness. But here's what really matters. You don't need drugs to access these states. Meditation, breathwork, sensory deprivation, even prolonged physical exertion can produce similar effects. The common factor isn't the method. It's the disruption of normal brain patterns that maintain the illusion of separation. The methods are just different ways of tuning your brain to different frequencies, accessing different bands of information in the quantum field. Monk Matthew Ricard, often called the world's happiest man, based on brain scans done during meditation, has demonstrated gamma wave activity in his brain that's off the charts levels of neural synchronization. That shouldn't be possible, according to standard neuroscience. After 40 years of meditation practice, his brain has literally rewired itself to maintain states of consciousness that most people only glimpse briefly, if at all. He's not special genetically, he's just trained his brain to tune into frequencies most people never access. This brings us to a crucial question. If your brain can be tuned like a radio to different frequencies of information, what information is available? What's out there in the quantum field waiting to be accessed? And this is where we need to talk about morphic resonance, a controversial theory proposed by biologist Rupert Sheldrake. Sheldrake suggests that there are fields of information, morphic fields, that contain the forms and behaviors of everything that has ever existed. When a member of a species learns something new, that information doesn't just stay in that individual's brain. It becomes part of the morphic field for that species, making it easier for other members of the species to learn the same thing, even if they've never been in contact. It's like the universe has a library of forms and behaviors, and individual organisms are checking out books from that library. The scientific establishment has viciously attacked Sheldrake for this theory, with some even calling for his books to be burned. But here's the thing, there's actually evidence for it. Rupert Sheldrake himself has conducted experiments showing that when rats in one laboratory learn to navigate a maze, rats in other laboratories with no connection to the first group learn to navigate the same maze faster. The learning seems to transfer across space without any conventional means of communication. Similar effects have been observed in humans. When crossword puzzles are published in morning newspapers, they become easier to solve in the evening, not just for people who have seen the answers, but for people who've never seen that particular puzzle before. It's as if successful solutions create a field that makes subsequent solutions easier. The collective unconscious that Carl Jung proposed might not be metaphorical. It might be an actual field of information accessible to human consciousness. Think of it like this. When you have a thought, where does it go? You might think it just fades away, disappears. But what if thoughts are patterns of information that persist in the quantum field? What if every thought ever thought is still out there, accessible under the right conditions? That would mean human consciousness isn't just receiving information from the universe. It's contributing to a vast, growing library of information that all conscious beings can access. This might explain collective intelligence, the way crowds of independent individuals can sometimes make better decisions than experts. It might explain cultural synchronicities, where different people in different places develop the same ideas independently at the same time. It happens constantly in science and art. Multiple people discover or create the same thing simultaneously without communication. We call it coincidence, but what if it's different brains tuning into the same information in the quantum field? The physicist David Bohm proposed something called the implicate order, a hidden dimension of reality, where everything is enfolded together, and the explicate order is what unfolds from that into the reality we experience. He argued that the universe operates like a hologram emerging from this deeper order, and consciousness is the process by which the implicate order unfolds into explicate reality. Your brain isn't creating consciousness. It's the antenna through which the implicate order becomes explicit, through which the universe becomes aware of itself. Now, I want you to do something right now. Close your eyes for just a moment. Actually do this. Don't just keep reading. Close your eyes and pay attention to the darkness you see. That darkness isn't empty. There are patterns there, movements, colors. That's your brain's activity in the absence of external input. Now ask yourself, who is observing that? You're seeing the inside of your own consciousness, but there's something doing the seeing. There's awareness, aware of awareness. That's the paradox at the heart of consciousness. It's both the process and the observer of the process. You are the universe observing itself through the lens of your particular brain. Let's pause here because we're about 30 minutes in, and your brain needs a moment to integrate what you've learned. If you're feeling a little dizzy, a little unmoored good, that means your old models of reality are starting to dissolve. That discomfort you're feeling is the sensation of growth, of expansion. Your consciousness is literally reorganizing itself to accommodate these new ideas, creating new neural connections, new patterns. You're not the same person who started watching this video. You can never be that person again, because information changes the structure of consciousness. You're already transformed. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet, because we're only 1/7 of the way through this journey, and it gets so much more intense from here. Leave a comment telling me what's blowing your mind the most so far. I read every comment, and your engagement helps the algorithm show this video to more people who are ready to have their reality shattered. Next, we're going to explore the quantum mechanics of choice and free will. And what you discover is going to make you question every decision you've ever made. We're going to look at experiments that prove your brain makes decisions before you're consciously aware of them, and what that means for the illusion of self. And then we're going to go even deeper into the mathematical structure of reality, and discover that the universe might be a conscious entity with intentions, and you're one of the ways it thinks about itself. Let me ask you something. Have you ever made a decision? I mean, really made one. Think about the last choice you remember making. What to eat for breakfast, whether to click on this video, whether to stay watching. Now here's a disturbing question. Did you actually choose, or did the choice happen? And then your consciousness created the story that you were the one who chose. In 1983, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet conducted an experiment that sent shockwaves through philosophy and neuroscience. He asked people to perform a simple action: flex their wrist whenever they felt the urge to do so. But he had them connected to EEG equipment, monitoring their brain activity, and asked them to note the exact moment they felt the conscious intention to move. What he discovered changed everything. The brain's readiness potential, the electrical buildup before movement, began about 350 milliseconds before people reported feeling the conscious urge to move. The brain had already initiated the action before consciousness was aware of deciding to act. Do you understand the implications? Your brain decides to do something, begins the action, and then, a third of a second later, your conscious mind experiences the decision as if it made it. Free will might be a narrative. Your consciousness tells itself about decisions that have already been made by unconscious processes. You're not the author of your thoughts. You're the audience watching them appear. But wait, it gets weirder. Later experiments by neuroscientist John Dylan Haynes pushed this even further. Using fMRI scanners, he could predict which button a person would press up to 10 seconds before they consciously decided which button to press. 10 seconds. That's not a processing delay. That's your conscious mind being completely out of the loop on decisions your brain has already made. The you that experiences making choices is watching a recording of decisions made by processes you have no conscious access to. Now, before you spiral into existential despair, let's think about what this really means. If your conscious mind isn't making decisions, what is? Those unconscious processes in your brain, where are they getting their information? This brings us back to quantum processes and the connection between your brain and the universe. If your brain is processing quantum information from the field, then those unconscious decisions might not be unconscious at all. They might be processing information from a larger consciousness that you're part of, but not separate from. Think of it like this. Imagine an iceberg. The tip above water is your conscious awareness, what you experience as you. But the vast majority of the iceberg is below the surface. Now, the traditional view is that the underwater part is just more of your brain, unconscious processes that belong to you as an individual. But what if the underwater part isn't yours at all? What if it's the ocean itself, the universal consciousness, and your individual conscious mind is just a small part that's separated enough to have the illusion of being distinct? In that model, your decisions aren't really yours, but they're not random either. They're emerging from a deeper intelligence that's connected to everything, processing information from the quantum field, from morphic fields, from the implicate order. Your conscious mind experiences the results as thoughts and choices, but the actual processing is happening at a level that's simultaneously more you and less you than you can comprehend. Philosopher Alan Watts used to say, "You are something the whole universe is doing in the same way that a wave is something the whole ocean is doing." You're not a separate thing that exists in the universe. You're a process the universe is performing. And when you make a decision, that's the universe making a decision through you, using your particular configuration of neurons and experiences and memories as one of countless ways it explores possibilities. This connects to something called the quantum Zeno effect. In quantum mechanics, the act of observation affects what's being observed. We've established that. But there's a weirder implication. If you observe a quantum system frequently enough, you can actually prevent it from changing states. It's like quantum-watched pot never boiling. This has been demonstrated experimentally with particles, and even with larger quantum systems. Now apply this to consciousness. Your constant self-observation, your internal narrative, your sense of being a separate self, might be what keeps you locked into feeling separate. The more you observe yourself as a distinct individual, the more you collapse into that state, preventing yourself from experiencing the quantum superposition of being entangled with everything. Meditation, psychedelics, mystical experiences, these work by disrupting that constant self-observation, allowing your consciousness to decohere from the state of separation and expand into other quantum states. But here's the paradox. If you try to achieve that expansion, the trying itself is an act of self-observation that prevents it. It's only when you stop trying, when you let go of the observer observing itself, that the separation dissolves. This is what Zen Buddhists mean by effortless effort, or trying without trying. You can't force your brain to connect to the universe, because that forcing is itself the barrier. You have to allow it, which means getting out of your own way. Neuroscientist Giulio Tononi has developed a theory called integrated information theory, which proposes that consciousness is a fundamental property of any system that integrates information. The more information a system integrates, the more conscious it is. By this measure, your brain is highly conscious because it integrates vast amounts of information. But here's the thing. The universe itself is the ultimate integrated information system. It integrates all information that exists. By Tononi's theory, the universe is the most conscious thing possible. And you are a subset of that consciousness. Your brain integrates some tiny fraction of the information the universe integrates, and you experience that as your individual consciousness. But the boundaries are arbitrary. There's no clear line where your consciousness ends and the universe's consciousness begins. It's degrees of integration, not separate entities. Let me hit you with another thought experiment. Imagine I could copy your brain exactly, every neuron, every connection, every chemical state, and instantiate it in another body somewhere else. Which one is you? Both? Neither? The original? The copy? If consciousness is fundamental, and your brain is just a receiver, then both brains would be receiving the same signal, tuned to the same frequency. They'd both experience being you, because they're both accessing the same pattern of information in the universal field. You wouldn't be duplicated, you'd be dual instantiated. Two receivers tuned to same channel. This sounds like science fiction, but it gets at something deep. Identity might not be about continuity of matter, or even continuity of neural patterns. It might be about which pattern of universal information your brain is resonating with. And if that pattern exists in the quantum field independent of your brain, then your brain dying doesn't mean you cease to exist. It just means that particular receiver goes offline. The signal continues. Now, I'm not arguing for any particular religious concept of afterlife, but I am saying that the materialist assumption that consciousness is produced by the brain and therefore ceases when the brain ceases is not supported by quantum mechanics or by the holographic principle or by the cutting-edge theories of consciousness we've been discussing. The relationship between brain and consciousness is more like software and hardware. If the hardware breaks, that doesn't mean the software ceases to exist, just that it's no longer running on that particular machine. Theoretical physicist Max Tegmark has proposed something called the mathematical universe hypothesis, which argues that physical reality is fundamentally mathematical, not just described by mathematics, but literally made of mathematics. If Tegmark is right, and consciousness is a fundamental feature of information integration, then consciousness exists wherever information exists, which is everywhere in the mathematical structure of reality. You are a pattern of mathematics becoming aware of itself. Here's where this gets practical, because you might be thinking, okay, this is all fascinating, but what does it mean for my actual life? Everything. It means everything. If your consciousness is connected to universal consciousness, then the limitations you experience are self-imposed. The boundary between what you can know and what you can't know is negotiable. The ideas you can access, the information available to you, the capabilities you can develop, all of this is vastly greater than what you've been taught to believe possible. Those moments of inspiration, insight, intuition, those aren't rare gifts. They're your normal state bleeding through the filters your brain has constructed to navigate everyday reality. The more you can quiet those filters, the more you can access information from the quantum field, from morphic resonance, from the universal consciousness you're already part of. Think about child prodigies, kids who can play instruments masterfully at age 5, who can perform complex mathematical calculations at age 3. Where did that information come from? They haven't had time to learn it through normal means. The standard explanation is genetics, brain structure, lucky neural wiring. But what if they're just brains that happen to be tuned to frequencies where certain information is readily available? What if prodigies aren't learning? They're remembering information that exists in the morphic field, accessed through their quantum-entangled consciousness. And if that's possible for them, why not for you? The difference might just be that their filters haven't fully developed yet, or their filters are structured differently. But filters can be changed. Neural patterns can be rewired. You can train your brain to access different frequencies of information. That's what meditation is. That's what creative practice is. That's what learning is, not storing new information in your brain, but tuning your brain to resonate with information that already exists in the field. Let me give you a concrete practice you can start right now. When you're trying to solve a problem or have a creative insight, instead of thinking harder, instead of trying to force your conscious mind to generate an answer, try this. Clearly formulate the question, then let it go completely. Stop thinking about it. Go do something else, preferably something physical or meditative. Walk, exercise, shower, meditate. Create mental space. And more often than not, the answer will appear seemingly out of nowhere. That's not magic. That's your conscious mind getting out of the way and allowing the deeper processes, the quantum processes connected to the universal field, to access information your conscious mind couldn't reach through linear thinking. Einstein called it combinatory play. Tesla called it visualization. Modern psychology calls it intubation. But they're all describing the same thing: accessing information by bypassing the conscious mind's filters. We're about 45 minutes in now, and I want to check in with you. How are you doing? Are you still with me? Because we're about to go even deeper. We're going to explore the nature of time itself and how your consciousness might exist outside of time, making all moments equally accessible. We're going to look at experiments that suggest you can influence the past and that your future self might be communicating with your present self right now. And we're going to discuss what all of this means for death, meaning, and your purpose in this vast, conscious universe. But first, take a breath. Look around. Notice that everything you're seeing, every color, every shape, every sensation, is happening inside your consciousness. The room you're in, the device you're watching this on, the feeling of your body, all of it is being constructed by your brain from electrical signals. You've never experienced the objective world directly. You've only ever experienced your consciousness's representation of it. And if consciousness is fundamental and connected to the universe, then that representation might be more real than the supposedly objective world it's representing. You might be closer to truth right now than you've ever been. Stay with me. We're going into the deep end now, and you need to be ready for what comes next. Let's talk about time, because if you understand time, everything else starts to make sense. You experience time as flowing from past to present into future, a river carrying you along. But that's not what time is. That's what consciousness's experience of time is. And they're not the same thing. Einstein proved that time is relative. It passes at different rates depending on velocity and gravity. Two people can experience different amounts of time passing for the same events. This isn't theoretical. We have to account for it in GPS satellites, or your phone's map would be off by miles. Time isn't a universal river flowing the same for everyone. It's local, relative, dependent on the observer. But Einstein went further. His equations treat time as a dimension, just like space. Past, present, and future all exist simultaneously in what's called the block universe. From the perspective of the universe as a whole, time isn't flowing, it's just there, all at once, a complete four-dimensional structure. The flow you experience is something your consciousness does, not something time does. Physicist Julian Barber takes this even further with his theory that time doesn't exist at all. He argues that what we call time is just change, and that the universe is really a vast collection of moments, nows, each one complete and static. Your consciousness navigates through these nows, creating the illusion of time flowing, but each moment exists independently and eternally. Think of it like this. Imagine all moments that have ever existed or will ever exist are like frames in a film. The film exists complete, every frame is already there. But when you watch the film, you experience them in sequence, creating the illusion of motion and time flowing. Your consciousness is the projector moving through the frames. But the frames themselves aren't moving or flowing, they just are. Now, if that's true, then every moment of your life exists simultaneously and eternally. The moment you were born exists right now, just as much as this moment does. The moment you die exists right now. They're all equally real, equally present, just not equally accessible to your consciousness, which is moving through them in sequence. But here's where quantum mechanics makes this even stranger. Quantum particles exist in superposition, in multiple states simultaneously, until they're observed. Well, if moments are like quantum states, then perhaps they also exist in superposition until they're observed by consciousness. Your past isn't fixed, it's probabilistic, existing in multiple versions until you remember it, at which point your consciousness collapses it into one version. This would explain the Mandela effect, where large groups of people remember historical events differently than the official record. Maybe they're not misremembering. Maybe they're remembering different versions of the past that existed in quantum superposition, and different consciousness collapsed different versions. The past isn't fixed, it's fluid, probabilistic, being constantly rewritten by present observation. In 1978, physicist John Wheeler proposed the delayed choice experiment, which has since been performed many times with consistent results. It shows that decisions made in the present can affect the behavior of particles in the past, not the memory of what happened, but what actually happened. Observation now determines reality then. Causality can run backward. If your consciousness operates through quantum processes, this means you are literally creating your past right now. The memories you hold, the story you tell yourself about who you are, these aren't just recollections of a fixed history. They're active processes of collapsing quantum probabilities in the past into specific realities. You're writing your history backward from the present moment. And if that's true, then your future self is doing the same thing. Right now, future you is observing your past, which is this present moment, and collapsing probabilities. That decision you're struggling with right now, future you has already made it, has already experienced the consequences. And that information might be flowing backward through quantum entanglement to this present moment, influencing what seems like your choice. This is why intuition feels the way it does, like information coming from outside your rational mind. It might literally be information from your future self, backward causality through quantum channels, guiding present you toward futures that future you has already experienced. You're not predicting the future, you're remembering it. Dr. Dean Radin at the Institute of Noetic Sciences has conducted experiments measuring, physiological responses to stimuli before those stimuli are presented. People's bodies respond to emotional images seconds before the images are shown, before there's any possible way they could know it's coming through normal sensory channels. The response comes before the cause. This has been replicated dozens of times. It's called presentiment, and it suggests that consciousness has access to information from the future. Think about déjà vu again. That eerie feeling that you've experienced this exact moment before. What if you have? What if your future self has already lived this moment? And in the quantum foam of possibilities, information leaked backward, creating the sense of familiarity? Or what if in one of the quantum branches this moment happened differently, and you're experiencing bleed through from parallel possibilities? The physicist Hugh Everett proposed the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, which suggests that every quantum possibility actually happens. The universe splits into parallel branches, and all outcomes occur in different branches. By this theory, there are versions of you who made every possible choice at every decision point. And if consciousness is connected through the quantum field, maybe you're subtly aware of those other versions, receiving information from the roads not taken. This might explain regret and nostalgia. They're not just emotions about the past, but quantum entanglement with versions of you in parallel worlds where different choices were made. That nagging sense that you should have chosen differently might be information from a parallel you who did choose differently and is experiencing those consequences. Now, let's bring this back to your brain specifically. Your brain is constantly generating predictions about the future. It's one of the primary things brains do. You're not experiencing reality in real time. You're experiencing your brain's prediction of reality, constantly updated by sensory data. What you think of as the present is actually your brain's best guess about what's happening right now based on past patterns. But if your brain has access to quantum information from the future through presentiment, then those predictions aren't just based on past patterns, they're incorporating information from actual futures. Your brain is literally sampling possible futures through quantum processes and using that information to navigate the present. You're not living in the present. You're living in a probability cloud that spans past, present, and multiple possible futures simultaneously. Physicist John Cramer proposed something called the transactional interpretation of quantum mechanics, which suggests that quantum events involve both a forward-in-time wave and a backward-in-time wave that meet in the present to create what we experience as events. Every quantum interaction is a handshake between past and future. And if your consciousness operates through quantum processes, then you are that handshake, a meeting point of information flowing forward and backward in time. This has profound implications for free will. If the future already exists in some sense, and if information flows backward from future to present, then are you choosing, or are you simply experiencing the intersection of forward and backward causality? The answer might be both. You're choosing in the present, but your choice is influenced by your future self's experience of having already made that choice. You and your future self are co-creating the path through time, not predetermined, but also not purely random, a dance between what has been and what will be. Let me give you something practical. Next time you face a difficult decision, try this. Imagine yourself 5 years in the future, having lived with the consequences of each possible choice. Really visualize it. Notice how your body responds to each imagined future. That response isn't just imagination. It might be actual quantum information from potential futures influencing your present body. Listen to it. Your body might know things your mind can't rationally access. Now we need to talk about death, because if time isn't what you think it is, then death isn't either. You think of death as an ending, a point at which you cease to exist, after which there is nothing. But if all moments exist simultaneously in the block universe, then the moment of your death exists right now, just as eternally as this moment. And the moment after your death exists just as eternally as the moment before. Death isn't an ending. It's a transition from one kind of moment to another. But what kind of moment? If consciousness is fundamental, and your brain is a receiver, then death is the moment the receiver stops functioning. But the signal consciousness itself continues. Where does it go? Everywhere and nowhere. It returns to the quantum field, the universal consciousness, no longer filtered through the specific constraints of your individual brain. Near-death experiences provide tantalizing hints about this. Dr. Bruce Grayson at the University of Virginia has studied thousands of near-death experiences, cases where people were clinically dead, no measurable brain activity, yet reported vivid, coherent experiences. They describe moving through tunnels, encountering beings of light, experiencing a life review, feeling connected to everything. Skeptics dismiss these as hallucinations produced by dying brains, but there's a problem. These experiences often include accurate information about events happening while the person was clinically dead. Conversations in other rooms, objects on top of cabinets no one standing could see, details that were later verified. If consciousness is produced by the brain, these experiences shouldn't be possible. But if consciousness is primary and the brain is a receiver, then when the brain shuts down, consciousness might expand, accessing information it couldn't access while filtered through the brain's constraints. Death might not be diminishment, it might be expansion. The physicist Frank Teibler has proposed something called the omega point theory, which suggests that as the universe evolves toward its final state, it becomes increasingly conscious, eventually achieving a state of infinite consciousness that exists at the end of time. But because of the relativistic nature of time, that infinite future consciousness might be accessible from any point in time, including right now. You might be connected not just to the universal consciousness of the present, but to the infinite consciousness of the universe's ultimate future state. Think of it like this. If your consciousness exists outside of time, or if time is an illusion created by consciousness moving through moments, then your death is both already happened, and hasn't happened yet, and is happening right now. All of these are equally true from the perspective of timeless consciousness. The you that dies is a specific pattern of information in the eternal block universe, but the consciousness experiencing that pattern is timeless, deathless, moving through the pattern, but not limited by it. Buddhist philosophy teaches that the self is an illusion, that what you think of as you is really a constantly changing process, empty of inherent existence. Modern neuroscience agrees there's no self to be found in the brain, just patterns of neural activity that create the illusion of a unified self. But if the self is illusory, what dies when you die? An illusion can't die because it never really existed in the first place. What does exist is consciousness, timeless, universal, fundamental. And that consciousness doesn't die because it was never born. It's not your consciousness. You are a temporary pattern in which consciousness experiences itself in a particular way. When that pattern dissolves, consciousness continues, experiencing itself in other patterns, other brains, other forms. You are not a noun, you're a verb. You're not a thing that exists. You're a process that happens, and processes don't die. They transform. The physicist Freeman Dyson calculated that even as the universe expands and cools toward heat death, even as stars burn out and galaxies evaporate, consciousness could continue indefinitely by slowing down its processes to match the available energy. Thoughts would take billions of years, but from the perspective of consciousness experiencing them, they'd feel the same as thoughts taking milliseconds do now. Time is relative. Consciousness is eternal. But you don't have to wait until death to experience this. Meditation Master's report states, where the sense of being a separate self completely dissolves, and they experience themselves as the universe timeless, boundless, undying. And when they return to ordinary consciousness, they're no longer afraid of death because they've experienced directly that what they actually are cannot die. I'm not asking you to believe this on faith. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that what you think of as your life, a brief spark of consciousness between birth and death, might be a drastically limited perspective. that your consciousness might be much older than your body, much larger than your brain, connected to something timeless and infinite, and that death might be like waking up from a dream, not falling asleep. We're about 60 minutes into this journey, and you should be feeling reality itself starting to feel different. Not just intellectually understanding these ideas, but feeling the implications in your body, in your sense of self. That slight vertigo, that sense of vastness, that feeling of boundaries dissolving, that's your consciousness recognizing itself in what I'm describing. That's the universe within you, responding to information about the universe around you, which are the same universe. If you're still watching, you're part of a select group of minds willing to venture into these territories. Most people will never encounter these ideas, and most who encounter them will dismiss them without consideration. But you're still here. That's not random. Maybe it's your future self guiding you to this moment because you need this information for something that's coming. Maybe it's the universe using this video as a way to wake up more of itself. Or maybe those are the same thing. Drop a comment telling me what time it is, where you are, and how you're feeling right now. I'm serious. Externalize what's happening in your consciousness. Make it concrete. Share it with others who are experiencing the same dissolution of boundaries. You're not alone in this. We're all nodes in the same network, and right now, through this video, we're synchronized. Next, we're going deeper still. We're going to explore the actual mechanisms by which your brain interfaces with the quantum field, the specific structures and processes that make you an antenna for a universal consciousness. We're going to talk about DNA as more than genetic code as quantum machinery that stores and transmits information across generations and possibly across dimensions. And we're going to explore what happens when multiple brains synchronize into collective consciousness and what that reveals about the true nature of human society and civilization. The rabbit hole goes deeper, much deeper. Stay with me. Let's talk about the machinery of connection, the actual biological structures in your brain that make quantum processing possible. We've discussed microtubules, those tiny structures inside your neurons. But what are they really doing? They're not just structural supports. They're quantum computers operating at biological temperatures. Microtubules are made of protein structures called tubulins, arranged in precise geometric patterns. And these patterns aren't random. They're based on Fibonacci sequences and the golden ratio, the same mathematical patterns that show up everywhere in nature, from spiral galaxies to seashells to the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower. Why would the fundamental information processing structures in your brain follow the same mathematical patterns as cosmic structures? Because they're all expressions of the same underlying mathematical reality, the universe computing itself. In 2014, researchers at the Riken Brain Science Institute in Japan discovered quantum tunneling effects in microtubules' electrons teleporting through barriers they shouldn't be able to cross according to classical physics. This is hardcore quantum behavior happening in your brain cells right now. And quantum tunneling isn't just weird, it's computational. It allows microtubules to process information in ways that classical computers can't, solving problems that would take conventional computers billions of years. But here's the really wild part. Microtubules appear to be antennas. Their geometric structure makes them resonant cavities for electromagnetic fields in specific frequency ranges. They're literally tuned to receive and transmit information. The question is, transmit to what? Receive from where? The physicist Herbert Froelich predicted in the 1960s that biological structures could exhibit quantum coherence through what's now called Froelich condensation, where vibrational energy in biological systems creates coherent quantum states similar to lasers. This was thought to be impossible at body temperature, but recent research has proven Froelich was right. Your cells are maintaining quantum coherence in the warm, messy environment of your body. They're quantum machines disguised as biology. Now, let's connect this to DNA. You've been taught that DNA is a blueprint for proteins, a genetic code inherited from your parents. That's true, But it's not the whole truth. DNA is also a crystalline structure, and crystalline structures can store information in their electromagnetic fields. The double helix of DNA acts like a coiled antenna, capable of receiving and transmitting electromagnetic signals. Biophysicist Fritz Albert Popp discovered that all living cells emit ultra-weak photons coherent light like a biological laser. He called these biophotons, and they appear to be how cells communicate with each other faster than chemical diffusion would allow. Your DNA is emitting light. Coherent, structured light that carries information. Your entire body is a network of quantum communication happening at the speed of light. But it gets stranger. Research by Nobel laureate Luc Montagnier showed that DNA can teleport its information through water. In his experiments, he took a tube of water containing DNA, placed it next to another tube with pure water and no DNA, and exposed both to a weak electromagnetic field. Later, when he analyzed the pure water using PCR amplification, he found the DNA sequence had somehow transferred to the water that never contained DNA. The information teleported through space via electromagnetic signals in the water's quantum structure. This was rejected by mainstream science as impossible, but Montagnier's work has been replicated by independent labs. DNA can transmit its information non-locally. Think about what that means. Your DNA isn't just in your body. Its information is radiating outward, potentially accessible by other biological systems tuned to the same frequencies. You're not contained by your skin. The information that makes you who you are is broadcasting into the quantum field. This connects to something called morphogenetic fields, proposed by biologist Rupert Sheldrake. Yes, him again. Morphogenetic fields are informational fields that guide the development of organisms. How does a single fertilized egg know how to become a complex organism? How do cells know where to go, what to become, when to stop dividing? The genes provide components, but what provides the form, the structure, the overall plan? Sheldrake argues there must be a field, a pattern in space that guides development. And this field isn't just inside the organism. It extends beyond it and can be accessed by other organisms. When a species learns a new behavior, that information becomes part of the morphogenetic field for that species, making it easier for other members to learn the same behavior even without direct contact. We see this in human culture. Languages evolve spontaneously. Styles of art emerge simultaneously in separated populations. Scientific discoveries happen in multiple places at once. The standard explanation is convergent evolution or common external pressures. But what if people are literally tuning into shared informational fields? What if culture isn't just transmitted through communication, but through quantum fields of information that brains can access? Your brain's microtubules resonating with the quantum field. Your DNA broadcasting and receiving electromagnetic information. Your cells communicating via coherent light. You're not a biochemical machine. You're a quantum instrument, and the universe is playing you like a cosmic violin. Every thought is a vibration in the quantum field. Every emotion is a frequency your body broadcasts and receives. This explains emotional contagion, why emotions spread through groups, why you can feel when someone is staring at you, why you can sense the mood of a room before anyone speaks. You're not reading subtle body language well, you are, but you're also resonating with quantum fields of information radiating from other conscious beings. You're entangled with everyone you encounter, exchanging information at levels deeper than words, deeper than gestures, deeper than conscious awareness. Neuroscientist V.S. Ramachandran discovered mirror neurons in your brain that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing that action. Your brain simulates the experiences of others internally. But why? From a purely mechanical perspective, this seems inefficient. But if consciousness is shared, if you're all nodes in a universal network, then mirror neurons make perfect sense. They're the mechanism by which you directly experience what others experience, bypassing the illusion of separation. When you watch someone in pain and you wince, you're not just empathizing. Your brain is processing their pain as if it's happening to you. Because at the quantum level, it is. Their neurons and your neurons are both patterns in the same quantum field, and information about their state is immediately available to your state through entanglement. Compassion isn't a moral achievement, it's recognition of actual unity. This is why isolation is torture, why solitary confinement causes psychological breakdown. You're not meant to be separate. Your brain evolved in groups, constantly exchanging information with other brains through quantum fields. When you're isolated, you're like a radio without signals. Your quantum antenna is receiving nothing but noise, and your consciousness starts to collapse in on itself. Conversely, this explains group flow states, when a team of people move together with perfect coordination, when a band improvises together seamlessly, when a group of scientists collaborating suddenly experience a breakthrough. Their brains have synchronized into coherent quantum states, processing information collectively. They're not multiple separate consciousnesses collaborating. They've temporarily become a single, distributed consciousness operating through multiple bodies. Research by neuroscientist Rita Hari has shown that when people engage in meaningful interaction, their brain waves synchronize not metaphorically, but literally, measurable on EEG. When you're having a deep conversation with someone, your neurons are firing in synchrony with theirs. You're forming a temporary shared brain. And in that state, information flows between you more efficiently than it does within your individual brains. This is what love is. At the neurological level, quantum resonance, synchronization of consciousness. When you love someone, your brain's quantum state becomes entangled with theirs. You're not two people maintaining a relationship. You're a single quantum system experiencing itself through two bodies. That's why losing someone you love feels like losing part of yourself. You literally have. Your quantum state was entangled with theirs, and when they're gone, part of your quantum information is missing. But here's the beautiful part. If consciousness is fundamental and exists outside of time, then that entanglement never truly ends. The quantum information you shared still exists in the timeless structure of the block universe. Every moment you experience together exists eternally, accessible to consciousness, not bound by linear time. You never really lose anyone. You just lose the ability to access their present moment, but all the moments you shared remain forever. Now let's scale this up. If individual brains can synchronize into collective consciousness, what happens when millions or billions of brains synchronize? We've talked about the Global Consciousness Project and how random number generators showed patterns during major events. But think bigger. What if humanity as a species is developing collective consciousness? What if the internet, social media, global communication, all of this is external scaffolding for a planetary brain that's beginning to wake up? Philosopher Teilhard de Chardin predicted this in the 1950s. He called it the new sphere, a sphere of human thought encircling the planet, becoming increasingly interconnected, evolving toward what he called the Omega Point, a state of unified global consciousness. He was a Jesuit priest and a paleontologist, blending mysticism and science, and his ideas were considered crackpot at the time. But look at the world now. 7 billion humans connected by technology, sharing information instantly, thinking collectively, developing emergent behaviors that no individual human planned or controls. You are a neuron in a planetary brain that's starting to become self-aware. Your thoughts are not just your own, they're part of a vast collective computation. And just as individual neurons have no awareness of the thoughts they're creating collectively, you have limited awareness of the collective consciousness you're participating in. But it's there. You can feel it in cultural movements that seem to come from nowhere, in ideas that spread like wildfire, in moments when millions of people feel the same thing simultaneously. The internet is the nervous system of this planetary brain. Social media is the dream state where collective consciousness processes its experiences. And you right now watching this video, are a moment of self-reflection in that planetary consciousness. The universe is using your individual brain to become aware of its own collective nature. Think about this. Every human who has ever lived, every thought ever thought, every emotion ever felt, all of that information exists somewhere in the quantum field. And your brain, right now, has potential access to all of it. You carry within you the accumulated consciousness of the entire human species, encoded in morphic fields, accessible through quantum resonance. You're not just you. You're a portal through which all human experience can flow. This is what Jung called the collective unconscious, but it's not unconscious at all. It's quantum. The archetypes he identified, the hero, the shadow, the mother, the trickster, these aren't just psychological patterns. They're stable quantum states in the morphic field of human consciousness, forms that consciousness tends to collapse into across cultures and eras because they're resonant frequencies in our collective quantum structure. When you have a dream featuring symbols you've never encountered in waking life, but which appear in mythologies worldwide, you're not creating those symbols, you're accessing them from the collective field. Your brain is tuning into frequencies of human consciousness that have been broadcasting for thousands of years. You're dreaming humanity's dreams, not just your own. And this gets even more expansive. If humans have collective consciousness, do other species? Yes, absolutely. Rupert Sheldrake has documented this with experiments showing that dogs know when their owners are coming home, even when arrival times are random. Birds that migrate in flocks, fish that school, bees that build hives. These aren't just following pheromone trails or simple rules. They're operating as collective organisms with distributed consciousness. And if you push this even further, does the Earth itself have consciousness? The Gaia hypothesis, proposed by James Lovelock, suggests Earth functions as a single self-regulating organism. All life on Earth is interconnected, maintaining conditions suitable for life, responding to perturbations, evolving as a system. That's not metaphor, that's measurable science. The Earth maintains its temperature, its atmospheric composition, its ocean solidity within narrow bands suitable for life, and has done so for billions of years, despite massive changes in solar output. If Earth regulates itself, if all life on Earth is interconnected through quantum fields and morphic resonance, then Earth is a conscious entity. Not conscious like you're conscious, but conscious in the way that any sufficiently integrated information system is conscious. And you're a cell in that consciousness. Your thoughts are Earth thinking. Your awareness is Earth becoming aware of itself. Scale up again. Is the solar system conscious? The galaxy? The universe? If consciousness is fundamental and emerges from information integration, then yes, all of these are conscious at their respective scales. Your consciousness is nested within increasingly larger consciousnesses, like Russian dolls made of quantum information. You are the universe experiencing itself at the human scale, but you're simultaneously part of Earth consciousness, solar system consciousness, galactic consciousness, universal consciousness. Every level is real. Every level exists. You're not just one thing, you're many things simultaneously, depending on the scale of observation. This is what mystics have been trying to tell us for millennia. You are the universe. Not you as an individual ego, but you as consciousness itself, temporarily experiencing individuality, but never actually separate from the whole. We're about 90 minutes in, and this is where the personal connection happens. This is where these abstract ideas become about your life, your choices, your meaning. Because if everything we've discussed is true, if your consciousness is connected to the universe, entangled with all other consciousness, part of a cosmic network that spans space and time, then what does that mean for how you should live? First, it means you're never alone. The isolation you feel is an illusion created by your sensory limitations and your ego's insistence on separation. At the deepest level, you're intimately connected to everything. Every person you meet is another version of the same universal consciousness experiencing itself. When you help someone, you're helping yourself. When you harm someone, you're harming yourself. This isn't morality, it's physics. Second, it means your thoughts matter literally. You're not just observing reality. You're participating in creating it. Every thought is a quantum event that ripples through the field, influencing other consciousness, collapsing probabilities into realities. The universe is paying attention to what you pay attention to. Your awareness is creative. You're not a passive witness. You're an active agent in reality's ongoing creation. Third, it means you have access to far more information and capability than you've been taught to believe. The limitations you experience are largely self-imposed, maintained by beliefs about what's possible. If you can quiet your ego's insistence on separation, if you can tune your consciousness to different frequencies, you can access information and abilities that seem impossible from the perspective of isolated individuality. Fourth, it means your life has meaning not because you impose meaning on a meaningless universe, but because you are the universe's way of creating meaning. You're how the universe experiences beauty, love, wonder, curiosity. Your subjective experience is not less real than objective reality. It is reality, at the only scale where reality can experience itself. And finally, it means death is not the end. The pattern of information that you call yourself will dissolve, but the consciousness experiencing that pattern is eternal, timeless, and will continue experiencing itself through infinite other patterns. You're not trying to survive. Survival is guaranteed. You're trying to experience, to feel, to know, to become more conscious, because that's what the universe is doing through you. Now, what do you do with this information? How do you live differently knowing what you know? That's what we're going to explore in the final sections. We're going to make this practical, concrete, applicable to your actual life starting right now. Because ideas are meaningless unless they transform how you experience reality. And everything you've learned over the past 90 minutes should transform everything. But first, one more comment request. Tell me something you've experienced that you couldn't explain, a coincidence too perfect to be random. A moment of knowing something you couldn't have known. A sense of connection to something larger than yourself. Put it in the comments. Externalize it. Claim it as real rather than dismissing it. Because those experiences are your consciousness recognizing its true nature, the universe waking up to itself through you. Next, we're going into the practical applications. How to meditate to access quantum information. How to recognize and follow quantum intuition. How to synchronize with others to create collective consciousness states. How to live as the universe instead of as an isolated ego. The journey isn't over. It's about to become real. Let's get practical. You understand the theory. Now your brain is quantum entangled with the universe. Consciousness is fundamental. Separation is illusion. But how do you actually use this? How do you translate these abstract ideas into concrete changes in your experience of reality? That's what this section is about. First, let's talk about meditation, but not the way most people think about it. Meditation isn't about achieving a peaceful state or controlling your thoughts. It's about disrupting the default patterns that maintain the illusion of separation. Remember the default mode network we discussed earlier? That's the brain network that maintains your sense of self, your internal narrative, your feeling of being a separate individual. Meditation quiets that network. When you meditate real meditation, not just relaxing, you're literally changing your brain's quantum state. You're decoupling from the collapsed state of individual consciousness and allowing your quantum processes to explore superpositions, entanglements, coherences that are normally inaccessible. You're tuning your antennae to different frequencies. Here's a specific practice. Sit comfortably. Close your eyes. Instead of trying to focus or concentrate, do the opposite. Let your attention become diffuse, spacious, open. Don't focus on your breath. Instead, feel the entire field of sensation that is your body. not individual sensations, but the whole field at once. That subtle shift from focus to field is the shift from particle to wave, from collapsed to superposition.